Well, that's a new thing. I don't know. So thank you for being here today with us. And thank you to Flo, who is back since I don't know when, Flo. It's been eons since you were with us. Like, I don't even know how long, but yay. So we do have a guest, Pat. It's an old friend.
Yes.
So anyway, thank you for being with us today. We know you have lots of choices in this world of virtual and hybrid and in person and whatever. And we're glad you chose to be with us here today. So I'm gonna, as I usually do, I'm just gonna start. And I'm continuing our series on memories today and how we use the old stories we have about what happened in our individual and collective pasts that either keep us stuck in old patterns or propel us forward into new ways of seeing our world and being in it. Author William Faulkner wrote in his novel, Requiem for a Nun, "The past is never dead. It's not even past." And it isn't past. It's very much alive and well, and informing our decisions unless we consciously choose to move it into our personal archives, into our history, and we choose to stop feeding it and feeding off of it and feeding off of what used to be. So in the world of Facebook, I get to see stuff that I don't necessarily get to see in other ways, and I know that's true for you as well. One of the things that popped up in my world this week was the little neighborhood bank in the town where I used to live, where I graduated high school, finally closed this year. It had changed ownership and names at least a dozen times since I moved away from that little town. My sister still lives there. And one of the town councilmen was given a couple of boxes of newspaper clippings, articles, and photographs that had been stored in the basement of the bank for all these years. And since the little town has a Facebook page and the town councilman has access to post stuff on it, some of the photographs ended up being shared. And last Sunday morning, my sister and I were talking about those photos and some of the stories that went with them. The girls that were the majorettes, the boys that were the football stars, the homecoming queens, the track, golf, and baseball stars, the Miss Whatever pageant people, winners and runners up, the hair, the clothes, the costumes, the kids that played in the band, the whole enchilada. What struck me is how some of those folks in those images are still living on the residuals of those glory days that happened such a very long time ago. And it could be equally true that there are people in that little town who were told way back when that they'd never amount to anything. And they have lived that story their whole life, believing and having that old story show up as their life, as their day-to-day experience. That's what default thinking looks like. When we live in our history and we play it out in front of our eyes on a daily basis, that's why William Faulkner's statement is so very true. The past is present unless we know enough to intentionally shift our thinking. I know also way back when, but not quite as far, when I was teaching middle school in South Florida in that painfully poor school district. Those kids had absolutely no expectation that their lives could be any different or any better than the lives that their parents lived. For those kids, there were no encouragements. There was no way to see a different reality. The only kids that I saw that glimmer of possibility in were the kids that were kids of migrant workers, because the migrants knew that their kids could do better than them. But for most of those kids, they were stuck. They had no mental model, no picture that moved them into a different reality. And I wonder now and then, I mean, it's been 40 years. Did I say that out loud? I wonder what it's like now, 40 years in the future, for those kids who had no comprehension of a life better than farming or fishing or, junk collecting, who knows what. I wonder how they're living now. I wonder what sort of world they're living in, because the world has moved so much in the last 40 years. I hope that they were able to find a way to move past their history. And I hope I was able to give those kids at least a window into being able to see some larger possibilities. So in another little book that Ernest Holmes wrote with Willis Kinnear, Thoughts Are Things, on page 38, they wrote, "The things we do, the way we feel, the relationships we maintain are the inevitable consequences of the ideas and the information we supply our minds. Not only are our conscious thoughts acted upon, but there is that memory storehouse that we have been placing things in for years that plays a part in any result we secure. When we don't like the experiences we encounter, we are prone to lay blame on conditions outside ourselves, forgetting entirely that for the most part, no other answer is possible from what our mind had to work with. However, we can always start to produce different results in our experience by feeding our minds different data, which will provide us with a more usable and beneficial answer. So I want you to think for a moment in your own life about an old story of yours that seems to keep returning, maybe in different forms, variations on the theme, maybe the same form. It's like Groundhog Day all over again. Things that keep recurring in your experience. In Foundations class, we called these experiences second harvest, which is kind of a tacky thing to call them, but that's what they are. We think we've removed a piece of bad data or faulty instruction from our experience, and we don't think we should have that experience again, and yet it shows up again and again and again. In later classes, we call it peeling the onion. If we choose not to be at the effect of our experiences, we keep peeling away layers of old beliefs until we truly have cleared them out. And there are some very deep-seated ones that take a long time to remove because we don't see how broadly we have infected ourselves with this piece of old story. And it could be something like, once again, years ago, when my brother was first learning to ride his bike without training wheels. For some reason, he was riding in the house. Because he was riding his bike in the house and he was a little unstable, he ran into a shelf full of knickknacks. Well, obviously, you run into a shelf of knickknacks with the bicycle, you're going to knock stuff off. And some little porcelain figures fell off of the shelf and broke into 1,000 pieces on the tile floor. My mother came into the room where he was standing there looking horrified at his mess, and I can still hear her exasperated voice. She said, "This is why we can't have nice things." She had an old story about not being able or not being allowed to have nice things. And it played out for her 100 different ways. And I don't actually know if she ever got over that story completely. It happens in relationships too. If I were to have a story, not that I've ever had this one, but we'll use it for an example, about not being taken seriously, or not being listened to, or not feeling valued or valuable. I would get to keep having this experience over and over and over again until I figured out that it was a belief I had that I didn't matter. It also happens culturally. It also happens beyond the individual in groups, in communities. If we think we don't matter, it's really hard for other people to value us. It also helps with respect to our health and our bodies. If I believe I've inherited some tendency towards some negative physical thing, like bad knees or high blood pressure, then I have most certainly inherited that tendency. This is a beast, right? Because it's so hard when it's physical, when it's in my face or in my body and I hurt. If I believe that it's generational or that everybody in my family has blah, 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 and I have it, so why would I think I shouldn't? We have to look at how our beliefs feed what our experience is. So I have an aside right now that I really, really need to say it, just in case somebody thinks we don't believe in doctors or medicine, because we actually absolutely use anything that works for our healing, for our wholeness. Dr. Holmes wrote in The Science of Mind on 219, and I'm paraphrasing, if we can't walk on water yet, we happily take a boat. On page 191 in the same book, he wrote, we believe in any method which produces results, whether it's a pill or a prayer, for each has its place in the whole. And so the challenge in that is to see what's going on and say, am I feeding a beneficial experience? Am I feeding a negative one? And I'm sorry, I hate to tell you, it's a constant process. It never stops. This is an onion we get to peel and get to peel and get to peel until eventually we get to the place of remembering our wholeness. As Holmes and Kinnear said in the quote that I used earlier, when we don't like the experiences we encounter, we are prone to lay blame on conditions outside ourselves, forgetting entirely that for the most part, no other answer is possible from what our mind has to work with. This would be really ugly as a realization if it didn't come prepackaged with a solution. We get to change our minds. We get to change our thought process. We get to change our worldview. We get to see all of the moving parts of our lives, of our world, working in our favor instead of against us. This is also one of the reasons that I'm a big fan of argumentative spiritual mind treatments. We don't deny the experience is happening, that we're having it, or that it did happen. We don't pretend. We don't do magical thinking and say it's all good when it isn't good in our mind or in our experience. We acknowledge the past experience, or maybe even the really recently past experience, or maybe even the present experience, and say, even though this has been my experience in the past, or even though some part of me might actually still believe that this is my experience, some other more divine part knows some higher truth, some greater spiritual realization that moves me in the direction I want to go. The great news in this is we don't have to make it 100%. We just have to keep working with that idea until 51% of us believes that the new idea is more powerful than the old one. Generally, it's not a quick process. Changing beliefs is not simple. Our beliefs are in there because they have served us in the past. But it is possible to change our beliefs and our stories, how we relate to them, And it's completely within our skilled skill set, our trained skill set to make that shift. It can be quick if we're motivated and very serious about it. And it can be glacially slow, but it's possible. We can take our old stories and change our way of seeing them, and take the information, take that lesson, and move forward. I have one more idea that I want to remind you of before I close today, and it comes from yesterday's daily reading in a book called Courage, Conviction, and Consciousness, 365 Days of Inspiration from Women of New Thought. I tell the daily morning practice group not to buy this book every time I use it, because most of it's not that great. The reading for yesterday was pretty good. Dr. Sue Sicking founded Unity by the Sea in Santa Monica, California, and served there for 40 years. In yesterday's reading, she wrote, "Our past has been a process of unfoldment. We unfold physically and mentally from children to adults. We unfold in spiritual consciousness. We have to get to know God and rise above limitations. You can see all your past in its proper light. Do not try to run away from past experiences. Just put them in their proper place. They were experiences you came through. Put away the anxiety and condemnation of yourself, just as children grow into adulthood and put away their toys. It doesn't matter what the past has been, or what you believe about it, or what you think about it today. It is being restored as part of God unfolding in you and through you. Nothing that occurred in the past can possibly separate you from God. It is never too late to be forgiven or forgive. It is never too late to be healed. It is never too late to be prospered. It is never too late to pray. It is never too late to receive your good. It is never too late to grow. What struck me in particular about her words, other than that they were fabulous, is that they came from a 1966 Unity pamphlet called "The Years the Locust Has Eaten." I didn't know this little booklet or the story behind it, so I went looking. And the title came from a verse in an Old Testament book called Joel. It's only 3 chapters long. It's a little itty-bitty book in the Jewish scriptures of the Christian Old Testament. The backstory is that the Israelites had experienced 4 years of drought and famine. And Joel, who was a prophet, came along and said, remember what's important. Focus on that. Do that. And God will restore everything lost in the years the locusts have eaten. Many of us feel a lot like we've experienced a locust year during this pandemic. We feel like we've lost a lot in a lot of ways, and we know people who have lost more than we have. We get to remember that this is only what we have experienced. How can we move forward, seeing the experience with clear eyes for what it was, and at the same time knowing the truth? From Dr. Sue, it does not matter what the past has been, or what you believe about it, or what you think about it today. It is being restored as part of God unfolding in you and through you. Nothing has occurred in the past that can possibly separate you from God. It is never too late. So I want to close with a favorite poem of mine from David White. You've heard this before because it's a favorite of mine. It's called "Everything is Waiting for You." Your great mistake is to act the drama as if you were alone, as if life were a progressive and cunning crime with no witnesses to the tiny hidden transgressions. To feel abandoned is to deny the intimacy of your surroundings. Surely, even you at times have felt the grand array, the swelling presence, and the chorus crowding out your solo voice. You must note the way the soap dish enables you, or the window latch grants your freedom. Alertness is the hidden discipline of familiarity. The stairs are your mentor of things to come. The doors have always been there to frighten you and invite you. And that tiny speaker in the phone is your dream ladder to divinity. Put down the weight of your aloneness and ease into the conversation. The kettle is singing even as it pours you a drink. The cooking pots have left their arrogant aloofness and seen the good in you at last. All the birds and creatures of the world are unutterably themselves. Everything is waiting for you. I invite you to consider that possibility, that everything can be waiting for you in every moment, in every situation, in every occurrence, in every story you have of your history. Take the gifts and leave the story behind, unless it serves you somehow. But be very, very intentional in how you choose to use that historical memory. Do that. Bless yourself and bless us all. Thank you. So I want to move on into the prayer. And if you want to remember some piece of history that you're ready to be done with, or think about some future that you wish to claim, do that while I speak these affirmative words. I breathe into the space of remembering. I breathe into the space of looking forward with new eyes. I breathe into the space of remembering that whole and holy presence that encompasses and infills my life and the lives of each beloved on this call. In fact, the lives of all beloveds. And I know that this great presence and power wishes to show up in more and more benevolent and beneficial ways in each of our lives. And it waits on our acceptance. It waits on our engagement and our enactment of this great good. It waits on our receptivity of seeing the lessons in the stories and moving from this moment of now into the next great yet to be. So I celebrate this opportunity to remember and know. I celebrate this remembrance of this powerful truth that lives in and as me and as each beloved. Already, no ticket has to be punched, no goal has to be achieved, no number of verses of anything have to be memorized or practiced, no numbers of minutes of meditations have to be done. The gift already is given. It's up to each and all to accept it and to move forward into the future of their creation. So I celebrate this awareness. I celebrate this practice. I celebrate this opportunity to see and know and to be this bright light of great good that shines. And I know that same brightness lives as each beloved, as they choose to shine their light. And the whole world is lit. And I know it's not struggle. I rest in this as an easy practice, as a constant, easy movement forward into the life of our choosing. In great delight and joy, I relax into this goodness and I let it be. And so it is.